Hi, I am Elizabeth Laidlaw, and I am here today to interview filmmaker John Mossman about Good Guy with a Gun. I was an actor in the film. I'm also a producer and an actor and a director here in Chicago in film and theater. John and I go back 20 years and have overlapped in theater and film quite a lot. We have a ton of questions here from our audience members from the premiere, February 27th. That we didn't get to. And so this is an opportunity to ask John these questions about Good Guy with a Gun. And John, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about, give us a context for this film for the people who have not seen it, who might be watching this.
Okay. I'm John Mossman. I'm the writer and director of Good Guy with a Gun. It's basically the story of a young man who lost his father to gun violence, who heads to a small town with his mother, and they have a fractured relationship. And this relationship, the rift gets widened even further by his descent into gun culture. And he goes down a path that ultimately becomes very difficult for him to walk back from.
And just want to mention, if you haven't seen the film, you might want to grab an opportunity to check it out before you watch this whole interview if you're worried about spoilers, because I think there's a few spoilers in here. So I'm going to begin with just firing some questions at you.
Let's go. I've never heard these.
All right. Was there a specific inspiration that birthed this? If so, how quickly did the story flow to script lock, and what was the writing process?
It was crazy. It was like 10 years of, or maybe 7 years of incubation, because I had this like really awful sort of prophetic dream, and I didn't talk about this for years. It was a dream that I was a shooter, and I woke up at about 4:30 in the morning, and I just started writing, and I hadn't done that for months. I hadn't written, and I sure as hell don't want to get up at 4:30 in the morning. Anyone who knows me, I'm not going to do it.
It's not your thing.
But I got up at 4:30, and I started writing. About 3 hours later, I hear my wife Kathy upstairs crying this like awful wail. I will never forget it. And I yelled up, and I was in this headspace of being the shooter. Actually, it was a first-person dream. It was really upsetting. And I hear her say, "Someone just shot up a school it's called Sandy Hook." And that freaked me out so much that I still get goosebumps when I talk about it. And the first time I really talked about it is just now that we've opened it. I feel like I'm exercising that, but that sort of lived in me for a long time. And I've had a lot of issue with gun owners and the NRA, and that was the first time that I'd ever heard that idiotic black and white statement of good guy with a gun, you know, being the only thing that can stop a bad guy, which is just this crazy apocalyptic sort of solution. And then the inauguration happened, you know, on January 6th, and then within like, I don't know, shortly after that, I was at my buddy Joe Swanberg's place chatting with Spencer. And we just chatted for about an hour, 2 hours about what was happening. And I went home that night and just started writing. About 3 days I had the script, because it was sort of a synthesis of two different stories that were going on in my head at the time. And that's kind of the way it works with me a lot of the time. I'll have one idea and I'll have another idea, maybe even a third idea, and years later they come together. And I wish I was faster, but once it came together, it was fast.
I remember the churn, but I remember once you sat down to write it, because you had another script in the hopper, completely different story in the hopper that I was reading, and you said, I'm going to set this one aside because this one forcing its way into my consciousness, and you kind of banged this out really quickly, as I recall.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah. The next part of this is tell us more about the name of the film. You specifically chose that phrase. And I think you and I talked about it, and I remember saying, "Woo, that's quite a title, John. You sure about that?"
Yeah, so did a few other people.
Yeah.
My investor.
I will admit to suggesting other titles. It was the right choice in the end, but I think we should talk about it a little bit because.
Yeah, I mean it's a black and white term, and it's a completely black and white term, and it's completely idiotic, and it's sort of, I didn't think anyone was really going to buy it. There was the outcry against it a little bit that I expected, but the thing that shocked me was the acceptance of it, the sort of like eagerness to absorb this black and white point of view that seems to then reflect the path that we've gone down, is that we cannot get away from our binary thinking. We can't. And in fact, we hunger for simplicity. We hunger for simple answers. We hunger for a strong man taking care of business that's, look who we picked.
Also, we are in a moment in our country where our politics are so complex, and the solutions and the fixes that we need, both politically, societally, everything else, are nuanced and complicated, and nobody has the patience or the time to consider how hard it is to fix the things that we need fixing.
Right.
I mean, just take the health insurance and medical, and try to fix that is a morass, and nobody wants to take the time to think about it. And when I feel like with that phrase, with guns, with everything else, when somebody wants to talk about fixing it, the first thing everybody gets to is frustration and anger.
Yes.
That's as opposed to like sitting down and being nuanced about it. It's frustration and anger.
And it's they not only do they not want to go down a couple layers deeper to find out what the real solution might be, because what's the repercussions and the ripple effect, but nobody wants to think several steps ahead. And that was also the impetus for this. I was thinking in terms of the Republican Party should have thought about the path they were going down.
Right.
And they did. And they knew where they were going. They thought
we really know how well they knew they were going with the Dominion lawsuit now.
And 15 years ago they knew where they were going.
Yeah.
They thought they could control it, but they didn't. So I fashioned a story that had a main character that did that in his life and went down a path that he couldn't walk back from. And coincidentally, it was the strongest advice and the best advice and the most consistent advice I ever got from my very Republican father. Who would probably be rolling over in his grave right now, I hope.
This story is a journey into the underbelly of something that some are realizing has been around for a very long time. What would you say is the most terrifying reflection to confront a story like this, and do you find anything ugly in that reflection in yourself?
Yeah, man. Oh, God. Yeah, pretty much everything. Everything I make is based on a dream. Everything is sort of a struggle between the primal and the intellectual for me. As I think about this a lot, is like we have two sides. And so I have to acknowledge that in myself. And you know that as an actor. Like you're constantly, that's your stock in trade.
Yeah, digging down and figuring out what you're capable of.
Yeah. So partly actually connected to that dream because it was so realistic, and I thought, oh my God, I could do that. And then I also was like, I understood something about it, and I didn't like it. And as a gun owner, I tried to understand the appeal and the danger of going down the path of this gun culture. And as a member of the sort of like identified with the gun culture, it's upsetting to me. So I recognize that I'm part of the group that's the problem, but I don't like being associated with that extreme element. How we define each other is really simplistic, and it's not always something that we're in control of. So I've been learning to reject the premises that I'm being presented with, and trying to create less of a black and white, this is who you are, this is who I am, and this is a little more of a discussion rather than a debate.
Well, I'm going to take this, what I think this question is about, a little further. So you as a gun owner, I mean, my experience of you as a gun owner is you're primarily a hunter.
Yep.
You use it for hunting, and it's sustenance hunting. I mean,
yes.
I have eaten meat you have hunted, and made stew out of it. I mean, like, you use the whole animal, and you use a single firing rifle, right? So it's one shot.
One shot,
He
deer.
often gets it too. That's the thing. He gets a lot of them. he's very good at it. But there's something for you, there's something very important about hunting in that manner, in a way that's like not disruptive to the environment, that's not like, you're not just spraying an animal full of bullets, you know what I mean? Like, it's very important that a single kill, you take it with one bullet, one shot, and that's like, which I am a big believer in sustenance hunting. I think actually if we all wanted to relegate our meat eating to simply sustenance hunting, and we didn't, we got rid of factory farming, I think we'd be doing a lot better. So I think that distinguishes you as a gun owner. Like, that is the reason you own guns.
That is
it's not recreational. You're not,
But there is an appeal to like plinking.
Yeah.
And it's related to like hitting your friend with an acorn, hitting a tree with a snowball.
Right.
But at some point, it gets weird.
Yeah. So maybe I think what this question might be referring to is when we're getting into the underbelly of something. I think that I'm guessing, but they may be addressing kind of that sort of where it washes over into that survivalist, libertarian, you know, like your two sort of villain characters who are stockpiling massive weapons that no civilian would need, you know, that are planning, you know, acts of terrorism potentially, are, you know, I mean, that's that I think maybe the underbelly we're talking about, and how far away that is from you, a responsible gun owner, or even your the character that Sky Shrum plays, who's Noreen, who is a more, you know, she's out there for target practice. She understands and respects guns, but she has a real problem with like the big machine gun.
I put that role in there very specifically for that reason.
Yeah. So maybe that's the underbelly versus the kind of gun owner you
are. So let's just say that character, she's more a little bit across the 50-yard line, as I would define it, but close to it. We would be close. I'm just there for sustenance farming. I don't own a pistol. I got issues with pistols, but I'm okay with somebody who owns a pistol and they're going out and they're doing some target practice and they're not, you know, packing, open carry, which is entirely designed for intimidation. So yeah, that is the ugly underbelly that I see coming out. And frankly, people like me, of which we are the majority, in terms of hunters, sustenance hunters even, that are pretty righteous, a lot of those folks, no one talks about it. No one comes out really vocally because the backlash you get is extremely ugly. I have gone online and I have argued with, I've gone on websites and said, I'd like to buy a gun from I'm looking for a new gun, but you know what, man, you traffic too much in the add-ons, the high capacity clips and the AR-15s. If you stop doing that like this other place, I'll buy a rifle from you, just FYI. And you would not, well, you probably could believe.
I could.
You could. And some of them even went so far as to sort of stalk me and then go and get pictures off my Facebook page. And one of them said this: don't make me out you. I know you're not a gun owner. And I said, how do you know that? And he goes, I saw your Facebook page. I know you're not a hunter. And you know what it was a picture of? Me and 18 black kids on the South Side when I was teaching them how to make film. I asked him to say it out loud.
Wow.
But that was a subtext.
Yeah, I find,
That's
what you made me think of is that, you know, there's more legislation around you hunting deer than there is around, you know, children, you know, the Uvalde and Sandy Hook. And I mean, there's more, deer are better protected and people will get angrier at you for killing a pretty little deer than they, you know, like than these children who are getting murdered, you know.
Yeah, there seems to be nothing that people want to do.
More structure around it, you know. I mean, you're from Wisconsin,
I'm fine with the structure.
I'm from Michigan. You know, there's hunting seasons. I have like my orange jacket that I wear when I'm hiking in Michigan during deer hunting season because I'm respectful of the fact that that's going on, and you know, they're being respectful of the seasons in which we hunt and when we don't. And okay. Characters are very layered. Do you think a rural viewer would feel accurately portrayed, or would they feel caricatured? And what was your goal with the design of these characters and the portrayal of the culture? And were you the right person to tell the story?
Totally think I'm the right person to tell the story because I'm a gun owner. I'm from a small town. That was the one thing that I was absolutely confident of. It was the one thing I was confident of, that I was the person to tell this story. Because we live in this time of sort of like identity and what story can you tell? I was very careful to find one that I would have no trouble defending, that I was able to tell this story, in my opinion. I grew up around guns, and a lot of this is just about my life in the 70s. So I think most people see themselves in someone in there, or their friends in someone. Certainly I do. All I can say is that I sort of wrote people, combinations of people that I know. I literally wrote Morgan's role for Morgan, Augie. And you know, I gave roles to people that I just tend to do that. I kind of think about them and their truth, and I write that role. I don't know if everyone's happy about it. I've gotten a lot. Here's the thing that's interesting. I've gotten a lot of good response from people all around the world, and then people in more liberal bastions like New York and LA and Chicago. And I've got a list of about 10 really good quotes or good reviews, and then one, awful, no nuance. Some dude from Ohio. So maybe, I sort of wanted to ruffle a few feathers. I don't know what his specific gripe was with it, but I found it significant, perhaps, that he was a guy from Ohio and just hated it.
Yeah, perhaps the fact that there weren't specifics about what he hated suggests that he wasn't open to the nuance. Suggests it, perhaps. That dovetails in kind of my thoughts. I mean, I think all the characters were quite layered. I was particularly, as a viewer, I was struck by everybody, but a character that would have been easiest to caricature, one of the easiest one to caricature would have been Cade, who's the first one we see holding a gun.
AR.
An AR, okay. I thought his storytelling was incredibly nuanced, and that's a credit both to you and to the actor who portrayed him. So the question here is, what was the evolution of writing Cade like? Did you always consider him as a sensitive boy that fell prey to his dad's beliefs? And this writer who wrote this question puts this caveat on, which I think we should just say out loud. Being the child of Republican parents and people who own and believe guns are not the problem, this is the very, very first time I have ever seen not just a child like Cade, but Donnell and Jonah, who so obviously do not innately believe the things they are raised and bullied into. Not everyone considers that these kids do in fact rage against the machine and are stifled and turned to hatred. Would love to hear, beautiful story, would love to hear what John has to say on the process of writing somebody like Cade without the continued influence of his father. Can Cade be saved?
I'd love to know who this person was. That's actually the kind of discussion I had with every single person that was involved in the movie. Like not even having to ask. People would offer up their stories about their experience and their thoughts and their theories and philosophies and questions. And Cade is played by David Stobie, who, man, sometimes things just happen for a reason. I found him by calling, Brian Shaw at Columbia and said, I need someone for a reading of this new screenplay I have. And I gave it out to like the first 3 people he suggested that called me back. First one who called me back was David. No coincidence, because he's responsible, a hustler, and he must have liked the story. He calls me back right away. I sent him the script. I said, would you like to, just for the reading, do the lead? He says, no, I want to read Cade.
Okay.
I was like, no, it's a smaller role, but I need to find someone to play that main role. So like, you sure you don't want to play? He goes, no, I want to play Cade.
Yeah.
And he didn't tell me why, and I didn't ask him why. I wanted to see what he did. But ultimately, he did play Cade exactly.
Yeah.
Or to some degree, even more richly than I had imagined, because he said that Cade was the most tragic character. And it just, he breaks my heart.
Yeah, and mine too.
That's just him saying goodbye. And I don't know if that's kind of one of the major questions for me at the end of it is, what's Cade's future? Does he have any chance? Now that his dad's gone, does he have any chance not to be that guy? But that's also why I inserted the cop, the dirty cop in the background.
Right, yeah.
Because that he's always going to have this force working on him, and his anger and all those other components that the death of his father and how he was raised, those are going to probably amplify.
Well, and the fact that the one person who seemed to be able to tap into some of this sensitivity and make him feel like he was safe to be vulnerable. You could see that his reaction, to the newcomer, is actually made him feel like he could be a little bit vulnerable and feel like there was somebody he could trust. And of course, the terrible irony being is that when eventually, probably, we get into this, but when probably things come out, or when he learns more about what happened to his father in, the continuation of Cade's story, it would be hard to imagine it wouldn't embitter him further.
Yeah.
What perspective on gun violence do you think this movie offers? Was it intentional to market it as a pro-gun film? Or do you feel it's marketed as a pro-gun
Oh, that's funny.
film?
That's funny. I don't find it is a pro-gun film, but
Right.
I intentionally gave it a contentious and black and white NRA associated title.
What perspective on gun violence do you think this movie offers?
I think the presence of a gun almost inevitably presents way more problems than it presents solutions. And these are problems that we can't easily recover from. They're permanent. They're
Right.
permanent solutions to
Yeah.
what should be a temporary problem.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in a small town. People had fist fights to settle things, right?
You can do a lot less damage with a
You
fist.
can do a lot less damage with a fist.
It's harder to harm somebody with a fist.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it almost by the nature of what a real fist fight actually is, as opposed to a Hollywood movie fist fight, it diffuses itself by the fact it's so close and personal and there's so much effort in it. You know what I mean? Whereas a gun, you hardly, I mean, these days you hardly have to even tap them and you could kill somebody. You know?
Yes.
So it's so easy to harm or to kill somebody. You spoke of the binary black and white culture that exists in the gun culture today. Do you think this film might increase the gulf between libtards and small-town gun Republicans, as they are often referred to in movies?
I would like to think that it's going to have enough impact to actually have some effect like that, but it's not my intended effect, the intended result that I want. I don't think it will. I think it's actually more of it might spur discussion.
That was going to be my follow-up, is like, do you think conversely it might actually, or is it your hope that it would be something that would close the gap a little bit? Right?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think there's going to be very few people that actually watch this that are going to have issues with it. They might, I'd like to know, I've always thought I create it in such a way that I would be very curious to find out who has a real problem with how I'm presenting that other side, the heavy-duty gun culture. I think it doesn't get ugly until pretty far down on that in that story, and people on that spectrum. And I'm very curious as to who would have a problem with that on I guess the right. I hate to say right and left, because like my family is largely Republican, but I'm really the biggest gun freak.
Right.
Most of them hate guns.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard for me to make those kind of associations.
Well, and these days politically, like, you know, you see, it seems like you have to fit everything into one or the other basket.
Yeah.
And if something about you doesn't fit into one of those two baskets, then it's frustrating for people. People don't know what to do about it. We're increasingly encamping on either sides of a broadening line.
Correct. We have to reassess that 50-yard line, who sets that 50-yard line as to who is on what side.
That's a sports ball thing, right?
That's a sports ball thing. And we have to reject premises that make no sense, that we're constantly being fed and like accepting.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak, having known you as long as I have, you are one of the most liberal-minded people I know in terms of social constructs, in terms of like, you know, function economically in every possible way. And the fact that you own guns and you hunt does not, but for some people that would automatically put you on one side of that line, you know, and which is not an accurate description of you at all.
Yeah.
You know. One last question kind of in this nature, and then there's more of these sort of lean into like the actual filmmaking process, which I think people are interested in. One of our Black audience members asked this question. I noticed you avoided using derisive terms for Black folk. Even the shooter was raceless, but his hoodie and posture implied Black. No N-words, which we know these types of characters use that word with impunity, especially among themselves. Characters said Black and African American. Why did you avoid that word?
This has been an issue in many of the things I've done, and that is the fear of white people, particularly white liberals, of which I am one, to use that. And I've heard that 3 times, all from my Black writer, filmmaker friends. If you don't use that word, I'm going to be pissed off. I've heard that I've heard that so many times. And so it's usually, that's not a surprise to me at all. It's usually, as one Black friend said, you don't want to whitewash it.
Right.
And I thought that was a great term for that. So I think it's a continued discussion we have to have, because there's a lot of pressure on us to to not use that.
Well,
But the
and
people
to step out of the, to step out of the way so that Black voices can have that conversation, and we should just be back listening to the conversation more.
And when I make a story about racist, the quote from my friend was, "Oh, you're going to make a story about racist. You're not going to use that word. Or they're not going to cause hard feelings. Or guess you're making a story about nice people, aren't you?" And something that just happened to me yesterday. It was interesting. A student refused to play a MAGA supporter, and I told I started to have this discussion with a friend of mine who's a Black writer, and I asked, "Do you think this is actually a form of supremacism and a sign of intense privilege that we refuse to tell the stories and say the words that are truthful, that perhaps are part of their story? So when they tell that story, not me, but when someone else tells that story, the person of color, will we reject that word? Will we not say that word?" That is telling them that we are not going to tell their stories.
Right.
And that's a form of censorship. Yeah. So it's something I've wrestled with. I totally agree. I had a couple of instances in there, and I got a lot of pressure to take those out. Inevitably, to no surprise who's Black, they were white. And so it's a continued discussion.
I have to say, it stood out to me in one moment, but there was something interesting, and this is a credit to you and to your cast in this moment, is there was something about the way it was said, and this is my recollection of that moment, but that it was being said to Beck's character, to Will, by one of the kids from the small town. And it seemed almost the way that the actor delivered it, and I can't remember if it was Cade or if it was Augie, but one of them said African American to Will, and there was something about the way they delivered it, as if they were trying, like that character was like, I want to have a friendly conversation with this person. I'm going to choose a word I wouldn't normally use.
Right. Yeah, his subtext was there.
There was an interesting subtext there that, like, the character was consciously avoiding the word as opposed to the writer avoiding the word, which I think was a nice way to walk that line, because, again, we are white presenting filmmakers ourselves, and so I am conscious of being more careful, like, what space am I allowed to be in, and what space am I to stand out of and just listen.
Right. But if I'm telling a story about racists, what's my responsibility?
Exactly. And it's a tricky thing that I think we're navigating, and we're going to keep trying to navigate it better. So was it hard dealing with guns on the set? How did you create an environment on set with your cast and crew, giving the heavy subject matter of the film? Yeah,
we took that extremely seriously. A lot happened around that. We started out with, like, getting everyone together to go out at that location, kind of get a chance for the cast, the core cast of the ones that were the shooters, to all go out and get to know each other, receive some good training from military people, from the armorer, Matt Stratton, and a lot of people had experience with guns. I had 2 military people. One was a sharpshooting instructor, and my producer, Kevin, he'd actually been in battle. Right. And I think Jessica actually was an instructor too, my scriptie. Yeah. So these are people that really knew guns out there, and so we had a lot of expertise, and people that played the role have been on gun ranges with pistols. Noreen,
right,
done that. Yeah, this guy's done that. A lot of these people have done that, and Beck was, I think, the one guy who hasn't done it, which was very appropriate. Yeah. But when we practiced that with actual blanks, and it's pretty startling to do. We thought that's how we were going to shoot that. And then 2 weeks before shooting, or less, we got the word that our insurance would not allow us to use actual firing blanks. Wow. Like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to get the recoil on the AR-15 and the bump stock and all this stuff? And how are we going to get all the flashes and the things coming out of the chamber, You know what? Post is amazing. I don't think we ever need to have, like, a hot blank on the set again. And
especially with what happened with the film, with the cinematographer who was killed, by me. It's like that highlights that even more. You can do all of that in post.
We can do it all in post.
Actors can learn how to react as if they're being hit, getting a kickback or whatever. You can train
I haven't heard anything from anyone complaining about the actor's ability to react. It looks great. The flames
very
look great.
Real to me.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. What was the audition process like, aside from the fact that you kind of cast like John Sayles and you just keep you have an ensemble. You can bring in.
Because I trust them. Nobody turns freak on me. Or if they do, I've handled it in the past, so I know how to handle it this time.
I think my audition process was a text message. You available for this or not? I don't know. I got to figure it out.
Yeah, because otherwise I got to start auditioning people. But right, I tend to, offer things to people, and then, I'll have them fight for it by making them audition sometimes, or hey, they get a chance to get in front of Claire, and she gets to see their work, and then she can weigh in and support sometimes my choices on that. She had a great casting director, Claire Simon, who brought some good people in, but also I had a lot of people that I've worked with before that I like, and that I trust and that I know are going to have the right vibe on the set. And it's difficult. The stuff I do is difficult. People have to go through rivers and swamps and 95-degree heat. So the audition process, really, I need to talk to every single person personally, I feel, to just sit in the same room with them, because otherwise the people that I didn't know, that was a Zoom process.
Yeah, of course, that was,
And so I don't really trust that as much. So every time I had to actually get in the room to talk to them, see if they actually showed up on time, see if they looked me in the eye when we talked, if they could engage, just all those little things that we seem to sort of be losing. Yeah, things we seem to be losing.
In the Zoom audition process, for sure.
So and a lot of them talked about their experience and gave me actual ideas, lines, talking points, just because they're just smart collaborators.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it was a great set to work on. It was a great bunch of people that, a lot of people I'm very fond of there, and a lot of the new people that I've gotten to know.
Oh, good.
Were terrific. So
that means a lot.
The scene, this stood out to me too, so I like this question. That scene between Tessa and her son where she screams as he yells at her was crazy wonderful. It was so real. Was there anything you'd like to share about how you directed this or how the scene was brought to life on set? I can echo that. It felt very real. I have a Will-sized son now, and we've had nothing to this extent. We have not experienced tragedy or loss or extremes. Our relationship is good and level, but that scene felt very familiar to me because it was reflecting a moment of extreme tension between a mother and a growing, not yet quite a man, and how they communicate with each other, fail to. So that struck me hugely too. I'd love for you to talk about that moment.
Actually, that scene is a culmination of probably the 15 minutes of most intense shit I've ever made in my life, and that's how I end it. And everything before that was difficult. The shooting of the mannequin, everything was ugly and just emotional and visceral. And it ends with that scene. So it had to be as difficult as it was. And I'm first of all, I'm glad to hear that you thought it was that good.
My own son was watching it 2 rows behind me, so I was, wondering how it was impacting him.
Well, the process, I wrote something. I learned a really good lesson from Alice Childress, who I didn't know personally, but have produced her work and been in her work, the playwright. And she wrote this great play called Trouble in Mind. And she was a black playwright who was sort of blacklisted in the 50s and in Broadway. She just never really hit her stride that she should have. And one thing she did was she always gave her villains humanity, and she gave them the best argument she could. And the excitement in that room when she gave the villain, or who was really kind of a complex villain, Al Manners, strong arguments, you could see everyone nodding, and then everyone nodding on the other side. So the first thing I tried to do was give Will the hardest, best argument for her to refute. In his argument for why we need guns and why his dad was a fucking idiot, and just said the most harmful things that I could imagine someone saying in that moment, and then shooting that. I had a plan that I talked through with my DP and my entire crew and the cast. I was going to shoot it 3 times. I was going to start. We were going to do a take. I was going to reset. No cuts. No lighting resets, nothing. Reset, go back, keep rolling, tail slate, have them go down, do it a second time. I just step in there, give a couple notes, turn around. Now by this time, they are shredded.
Right.
And so for the 3rd take, had them come down and quick note, no time to reset. And they started at that heightened state. And so that last part of that scene is the third take, where they're just emotionally destroyed
Right.
and at the peak. So did that, and then it was like everybody was exhausted. You know, we tried to have a laugh, but that was hard because you're also in a basement. It was like the belly of the beast, you know. It was just, we were trapped, a cement basement. And so what happened is when I gave it to my editor, Anna Christian, she edited that, and I never watched it.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't even participate. And almost every time I see her, I thank her, and I see that scene, I thank her for doing that because I wasn't capable. I'm an editor, and I usually think, oh, I can cut the scene. I wouldn't touch that scene. I just didn't want to look at it, and it was difficult for me. And the fact that she slogged her way through that really painful scene and made it as good as it was, that's all her. I got the raw material, and she picked all the right shots, and then we shaped it a bit.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a very hard scene to shoot, but as an actor, I can absolutely say that in a moment like that, having less interference in terms of like, oh, let's adjust this light. It's like no light, no subtle light change is as important as the performance. And if you kept getting cut and people flying in with makeup or what, you know, anything like that disruption that happens when somebody else cut, you know, that the energy kind of dissipates and all of this ancillary activity happens around it, and it absolutely dissipates. In a moment like that, I think your plan was absolutely right. And of course, you're an actor yourself, so you know how necessary that momentum is.
Yeah,
you know,
we
in
need
a
a
moment
sense
like
of
that.
flow, and it's hard on a film set to get flow. And it's something, you know, it was something that I really was really grateful for with my crew and my cast. And man, they were just dedicated to watching the work and enjoying the work and watching other people's work. And so it was not, as I often find, a subtly hostile environment on film sets sometimes to the work. I wanted to make at least this scene as friendly as it can be in the most unfriendliest of scenes.
Right. Which dovetails beautifully with the next question. How did you create such a deep bond among your cast and crew that's so visibly translated into the story and characters?
Oh my God, that's the nicest thing anyone could ask me. That's like that's great. Some people knew each other, but a lot of them were young, new actors. So the first thing that I did, because you have to pay for rehearsals, right? Did not have a lot of money. So I was like, who's of age? Okay, let's all meet down at Reggie's. I'm going to buy y'all dinner. We're going to have some beers.
Yeah.
And so we sat down. It was just super low pressure. It was all the kids, all the shooters from that scene. Everybody who was going to be in that shooting scene, because I already had to get them together for the gun training. So I was like, let me just buy you guys dinner and beers. And they all came down, and Kevin came by, and I think John the Flamboy stopped by. And that was the beginning of the bonding. And what was the cool thing is that the new people caught on to the vibe that the established people that I'd already built relationships with were establishing. So there was a foundational sort of vibe that was happening and a bonding that was happening. And then when everybody else came on, it was all built around that.
Right.
Yeah.
That was really smart. Knowing that scripts often change throughout the process and in editing, did you film multiple endings? Or is there anything that once you're in anything that changed once you were in post-production?
The ending montage was written out, but we didn't cut it exactly that way. We played with a whole bunch of different options of what order things should happen in, what should be included, what isn't needed to be included, what made no sense that I thought might make sense. And we shot a couple different things that we'd hoped maybe we could put in. But ultimately, the biggest decision was, what should the last shot be? And we wrestled with the idea, should it be that gun? We had a beautiful sort of dahlia of that gun. And
I remember that day. I was there that day when we shot that.
Should it be that gun? And for me, it had to be Will looking in the rearview mirror. To make sure that we didn't give too much of an impression that this kid was getting off scot-free, that he was always going to be looking in the rearview mirror.
I want to grab onto that because, like I said, my own son was there. He's 16, and I got tickets for him and for two of his friends to join and watch it. So they're 16-year-olds. They go to school here in Chicago. There are a lot of conversations about gun use, I think, in schools, both formally and informally. One of his friends said, "This is this is a pro-gun movie. Is this a pro-gun? This is a pro-gun movie, right? Like after the film was over.
What?
And yeah, and because it was a Monday night and they all had school the next morning, I kind of shooed them out. And I was like, you guys have to get home. You have to get to bed. You have school in the morning. And they didn't stick around for the discussion, which I regret. So one of the reasons I'm happy we're doing this, and I'm hoping they'll watch this, is that I would love you to respond to that in light of that ending, in the light of the takeaway. And I mean, we've kind of addressed a lot of that, but if that young man, my son's friend, came to you and said that, what would your response be?
I would say the fact that we portray people using guns in a healthy way can make it seem pro-gun. And in that way, it kind of is. It's pro using a gun for whatever it is that's not killing a person. But once you start carrying a gun, you run the risk that you're going to kill a person. Something's going to happen. You're going to shoot yourself. You're going to shoot your buddy. You're going to shoot somebody that you're going to wonder if you had made a mistake shooting them. All of which happens in this movie. You know, like the idea, it's anti-gun everywhere.
Right.
That's what it's anti, and that's where we're going. That's the answer that seems to be out there. It's pro responsibility. It's pro accountability, and the idea that if you have a gun with you, something bad might happen, and you can't walk that back. You see people using guns in a healthy way, and then you see somebody carrying a gun. And he shoots the bad guy. First of all, the first good guy with the gun gets the gun taken away. That's the first thing that happens with the gun. It gets taken away and potentially used against you, because that's the majority of the time. That's what happens. Things don't work out the way you want. And the second good guy that gets the gun shoots the guy in the back, and he shoots his buddy through the guy. Also something that happens. And then the third thing that happens, which doesn't get talked about enough, is this person wonders whether or not he should have actually shot him. And for anybody who is deeply religious, like this character is, do you actually think, and this is something that the right wing seems to embrace, so I would like to challenge them with this, is do you think that an actually deeply, truly religious person who calls themselves, like many of them, a Christian, could actually live their life knowing that they took a life and be good with that? You're not asking them to be a savior. You're asking them to be a sacrifice. And you should take that a little more seriously before you tell someone to carry a gun.
Yeah. It's interesting because you look at a scene like that, and like I said, if it were fists or even a knife, it's actually, I mean, we've both been trained in stage combat and that kind of thing. One of what makes a film or a theater move with weapons look good is the effort and the difficulty it would take to hurt somebody up close like that with a blade. You just can't inflict that kind of damage with anything but a gun. That the movie would be entirely different if it was a knife fight in that moment. Somebody probably been cut pretty badly, maybe, but it's hard to do that. It's hard to even emotionally get the gumption up to do that.
To actually stick someone right.
Yeah. So I think that what I got is this movie isn't pro-gun at all. That this is about responsibility, about accountability, about repercussions, about consequences, and about acknowledging that. I think what was wonderful, not wonderful, it was so truthful about the moment when Will, who has been shown up till now to be actually quite a good marksman, like he seems to have a real talent for it, in the moment when he is being attacked by somebody whose moral compass has swung so far off that he's being assaulted by somebody who has lost all perspective. I feel like when you have a gun in a situation, it's always going to be somebody like that who's going to win, right? Like you can't be a good person and effectively respond to a moment like that. I mean, that's what I get out of that scene. That Will is somebody who he's good at this. He could fire this weapon. He could stop this guy coming at him, who's clearly a bad person, and it would be a move of self-defense. But his own nature gets in his way, as I like to think mine would. Yes. I mean, I can't imagine actually being able to fire a gun into a person. You know what I mean? I think I would falter.
Yes, I've been told by people that have been trained with pistols that you have to envision it over and over and over to allow you to actually be able to do that in that moment, because you will falter. Or You might freak out in a moment where you're feeling threatened and shoot somebody that might not have been presenting you with any kind of mortal danger.
Right. I mean, he's a good marksman. In a moment of panic, he might have fired wide and hit Jonah, who's standing right behind him. You know, so yeah. So that's my takeaway, and it was important for me to address that. Little pickup questions just at the end. Why was the priest? I think I know, and I loved it. But why was the priest or pastor crying at the end of the movie?
Well, he'd been told everything.
Yeah.
And now he has to bear that weight. And he's probably crying for Jonah, who he has deep compassion for. He's crying possibly for Cade, who's going to have no father, that will have to live never knowing what happened to his dad. And he's bearing this weight and wondering, should he say anything? He won't. But he's going to live with that.
Is he legally bound to say something as a priest? Does he have to say something?
No. I talked to a priest at one of the churches that we were actually location scouting at and talked to him for a while. Yeah. And I said, do cops come? He goes, all the time. But they know I can't talk.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What an amazing deal that has been cut there. Okay, the officer in the sunglasses seems to be radioing as the Greenwoods drive away. Is that move deliberately meant to suggest that the story is far from over?
Yes. The story is far from over.
Right, okay. And to that end, when is the sequel coming out? And what are some ideas you have for what characters and storylines it would continue to follow?
The first suggestion that came up was around a campfire, and it should be Cade. Cade's new life on Broadway.
Right.
And it starts with him, with his audition. Oh. You have to talk to Stobie. Yeah. When you see Stobie, ask him to do Cade.
Yeah.
Preparing for his audition.
His musical theater career.
Yeah. Oh, we felt we really needed to shift the tone for number 2. Yeah.
I think knowing what it took you to make this film, I think this story, I personally, as a viewer and a filmmaker, I'm not a big fan of sequels. I like films to be a door opens, you see a life, you see a moment in a life, and then the door closes, and it is you imagine what came before, and you have to imagine what came after, and you have to wrestle with it.
So did this do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
I thought about it. I think about it a lot. I imagine what will happen to these people. I feel a lot of dread for these people. That's my takeaway. But other people will have different.
That's great. Yeah, and I tried to ride that line so that some people would feel that and some people would feel less. But this is really an ending as a tribute to Deliverance. And that vibe, that really deeply unsettling vibe.
Yeah.
That they kind of got away with it.
But you don't. They didn't. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we have covered all of my questions, certainly, and all of these questions. So, anything else you want to throw on the end there?
No, I feel good. Thank you for listening. Thank you all for coming that actually came to see it, because it was there are a lot that didn't come to see it because you couldn't get tickets. But keep your eyes out for the next one.
We're working on that.
Yeah,
we're working on another screening for that.
Midwest Film Fest will be notifying you of where and when that will be.
Yeah. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this. I certainly did. All right.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you, friend.